everyone, so welcome back to the channel. So today's video is going to be a little bit nostalgic. I'm going to be reviewing the CV that I sent in to get my first ever job in data science with zero experience, and it took me a while to find this, so I haven't actually analysed it yet, so I'm going to do it fresh with you guys right now. So stay tuned on this episode of Genomics with Georgia. Welcome to the channel. My name's Georgia and I've been working in data science and bioinformatics for over 4 years now, and I landed my first job in data science with no experience back in 2020 at a world-leading genomics research institute. I am so grateful for that opportunity. It got me to where I am now without having to do a PhD or a master's. But how did I get that first job in data science with no experience? Well, that's what we're going to discover today. So right with me on my screen, I have the role description of the job I applied to, and I have my CV that I sent in. So I thought we'd have a look at the job description first, and then we'll dive into the CV that I sent off for that job. Now, it's really important to note actually that when I applied for this role, I applied through a recruiter, and the recruiter only took my CV and they didn't make me write a cover letter. And I think that the recruiter wrote a cover letter for me, but I never saw what was in that cover letter. So thank you, Mr. Recruiter, but I only submitted this CV. Also, the role was advertised at a senior level, and then upon seeing my application, they created a grade 3 role, which was a junior role at the institute, so that I could apply to a junior position. So the job spec I'm going to show you is the one that they created for the junior position rather than the one that I originally applied to, if that makes sense. Okay, so here we are. This is the role profile for the role that was my first role. It's exciting. So the job title was Junior Genomic Surveillance Data Analyst, which 5 words in a job title is a bit insane. But after a year of the job, they had a kind of restructuring and changed the name to just Data Scientist without any kind of promotion. It was just a name change. But this was the first name of the role. So as you can imagine, it was a junior role. I was going to be learning on the job, and it was in genomic surveillance, which is kind of keeping tabs on how genomes can change through space and time. And then it had data analyst as the role description, although like I said, it got restructured to data scientist later on. So it was a grade 3 role, which in this institute meant entry level, and then grade 2 would be senior, and then grade 1 would be principal. So you can think of this as like entry level. I was reporting to the head of the data analysis team, and obviously I had no management responsibility. So we can see the kind of role purpose and objectives. So analysing genomic data, interpreting those results, supporting global health organisations in their surveillance activities. What's really important here is because the role is junior, right? Developing skills is part of the role's purpose. Like, it's a training role, which was super cool. And then the main objectives are rapidly develop skills, tick, did that. Domain knowledge and experience based on an agreed set of learning objectives, produce bespoke analyses, answer operational questions, and produce regular data analysis reports and open data resources. So in terms of those core accountabilities, what were they looking for? So data analysis, mathematical modelling, doing stats over large genomic data sets, producing high quality data resources, supporting the team with ad hoc work, supporting the design of computational methods, using industry standard coding and documentation practice, very important, being effective team player, contributing. So it's all kind of, working in big things, but in a kind of supporting role and a learning role, but still doing things to a high standard. Handling these large data sets, proactively taking part in translational and research projects, promoting the individual and teamwork at conferences and at meetings, etc. And then now we get onto the knowledge and skills bit, which I think is really important. So I needed to show that I had undergraduate training in comp bio, genetics, etc. That I had base level computer programming skills, as in I can do Python. Like if someone gives me a CSV file, like I can analyze it. Knowledge of the basic methodologies, ability to rapidly gain the knowledge in a new environment. And I think this is one thing that's always really important to show that you are a really quick learner. Ability to communicate effectively about complex technical matters, so communication skills, very important. Proven ability to work independently, learn new skills, flexible, proactive. You see the kind of narrative here. Oh yeah, look, large-scale computing using HPC facilities, all your basic kind of stuff, nothing too complex, but a lot of these adjectives about being flexible, enthusiastic, etc. Interact with experts from different fields, effective communication, and then there's a nice section about who I'd be interacting with. So interacting with the head of the team, interacting with other teams, coordinating things with partners, methods and pipeline development, talking to IT core informatics, tool productionization, and providing requirements. So you can really see that this role was very communicative, talking to all these different teams and kind of helping provide those requirements, working on the methods development, but really being able to communicate across all of these different disciplines. And I say this all the time, it's a great thing about bioinformatics is this cross-discipline communication. So that was the job spec. So let's now move on to the CV that got me an interview for this job. So here's my CV, and you'll notice that my CV was 1 page long. And before I go into my CV, let's just set the scene a little bit. So it's 2020, I'm applying for this role, and I've just finished my undergraduate degree, and I've just finished an internship at the Research Institute where I did my undergraduate thesis. So I'm very much fresh out of university. I've been sending off some random job applications, but I don't have any formal work experience in anything like I was applying to. So that's little Georgia who wrote up this CV. And I'm going to go through the CV, and as you can imagine, right, there's many improvements that I could make to said CV now. So I'll try and point out the things that I think I would improve if I was, doing this first job CV again. But let's dive back into 2020 and see what my CV was like. So first of all, 1 page. I think I only had limited information, so I just put it all on 1 page. Secondly, you'll note that it looks pretty cute, I might say. So this is a template from Overleaf, which I have mentioned on this channel before, but Overleaf have a bunch of CV templates that you can then go and code up in LaTeX. Is it LaTeX? Can't be LaTeX. Yeah, LaTeX. And it's really nice because you can just plug in your information, switch around the little chunks of code and lay it out how you would like to lay it out. We can see here that I have an education section at the top, skills section next, research experience, courses that I had done, and then the other things that made me me. So my volunteer work I was doing at the time, and then my previous employment that I'd had during my degree, which sadly isn't on my current CV, but this was like such a huge part of who I was, so I had it on my CV. So let's go up to the top. So the first thing you might notice is that there's no opening statement. So personally, I'm not one for opening statements. I think you've got your cover letter to do that. So I'd rather save space on the A4 page for more succinct bullet points. So I've got no intro, personal summary statement. So I start off with my name right at the top, and then we've got 3 kind of phrases that summarised who I was. So molecular biology and genetics graduate, so I just finished my degree. Bioinformatics trainee. So even though I'd just done an internship, I felt like that kind of summarised, I had been training up in bioinformatics. So bioinformatics trainee, and then customer service enthusiast. So as I mentioned, I'd spent so much of my time working in hospitality, and this really was a core component of the person I was selling. So 100% customer service enthusiasts. I so deeply cared about customer service, and I really miss hospitality. And then underneath my kind of 3 big headings, I then had my mobile number, a contact email address, and then my LinkedIn @ So these are all hyperlinks. So if you were to click on them, it links you to LinkedIn. If you were to click on the email, it would open it up in an email tab. And then if you click on the phone, I can't remember what happens, but anyway. So I think this is great. And I also would say at this point, the @ of your email, just make sure you're not using some really old, embarrassing email address. Make a professional email address. So I made a new one recently around this time, so make a new email address. And then the LinkedIn @ this looks super messy. So at the time, I hadn't changed my LinkedIn URL. So LinkedIn auto-generates you one, but you can also go into your settings and make it neater. So now mine's just like GE Witten rather than this long thing with numbers. So I think that looks messy. And you gotta remember, CVs are all about first impressions. Are you someone that takes care of the URL? You know, these things do matter. First up as the section was my education. So education, obviously important. It's the kind of bare minimum requirement when you're applying for a role. And if you're a new graduate, it's the most recent thing that you've done. So I had my most recent one first, what the degree was, what the name of it was, my grade, which, oh my gosh, at the time, I hadn't even got my grades. Wow. So predicted first, which I did get, epic. And then the year, and then the location. Then I've got my kind of certificate of higher education that I did in medical science. And then I stuck in my A-levels and GCSEs because they felt relevant at the time. You'll notice I did A-levels in philosophy, biology, and chemistry. And if this doesn't scream that you went to an underprivileged school with no career guidance, I don't know what does. And then got my grades for that, the years, etc. Yeah, and then I had my high school, and then I just included that I got A stars in my triple science because felt relevant. I feel like I wouldn't include these anymore. I don't think anyone really looks at GCSEs. I think I had the years on, but I don't think the years are always necessary. The location as well. Most of my experiences are all in Norwich, Norfolk, which is where I grew up. And I don't think the location is necessary. So I think I've taken these off my current CV now. So you don't have to include location. The next section is a skills section. So I think this is one of the most important things about a bioinformatics CV, and particularly an entry-level one, or really any kind of research assistant job. You're coming in to do a technical role, so it's really good to tell them the skills that you're going to bring to the position. So I had this skills section, and then I've split it up into 4 key themes that kind of encompass my skill set that I was going to bring. So I put research skills, computer science skills, bioinformatics skills, and then operations skills. So yeah, I think I was kind of playing around with what best encapsulated the skills I had, and these were the themes that felt most natural. So in terms of research, I've put data interpretation and analysis. So if you note, that's what the team was called in the job ad. So I've then put that was smart of me. I put that as my skill, my first skill that they're going to read. And they'll go, oh, she can do data analysis and interpretation. And that's like the terminology that they were looking for. Efficient resourcing. I remember putting that because one thing I learned on my undergraduate thesis was I kept finding these really cool packages that were really good for the job, but no one had kind of told me to use them. So that's what I was getting at there. Written communication, obviously writing up your thesis, doing all that kind of stuff. And then graphic design. And this was because I just discovered biorender, and I feel like I was on biorender pretty early on. So in 2020, I was using biorender to make these really nice graphical abstracts. So graphic design went as one of my research skills, but now everyone knows biorender, so like I'm not that special anymore. And then the second theme was computer science. So that's where I put my kind of hardcore coding, programming stuff. So I did it in order of what I was most comfortable with. So Python number 1, R number 2, which is hilarious because I haven't used R since I got this job 4 years ago. Bash, which I'm now way more comfortable with. Bash wouldn't be third anymore. Then I've got cluster computing, so this is being able to use those like HPC resources that you get at these big institutes. And then in the square brackets, I've just gone ahead and put the workload manager, because you can have Slurm, or you can have LSF, or you can have like another bunch of other schedulers. And then data visualization, because even at this point, I was pretty certain that I was good at plotting, love plotting. So that felt like a good skill of mine, and also fitted in with the theme of the team I was applying to. And then I've got a bioinformatics section. So these are those kind of more biological data processing tools and packages I was familiar with. So I've just gone ahead and listed all of the bioinformatics packages I've been using in my thesis and internship. So SAM tools, BED tools, HiSat. Then I put in general RNA-seq, which is a bit vague. Bioconductor, bioinformatics in R, kind of houses all of the packages. Then I put the one package that I used, which was DXSeq. Then I put Leafcutter, which I was supposed to use, but then we couldn't get it installed and something went wrong and I never ended up using it. And then very boldly I've put NGS analysis, which, I mean, I was analysing next generation sequencing data, but that does feel a bit of a stretch, but hey ho. And then for operations, this was really trying to encapsulate all of my customer service experience. And that's because when it's your first job in the field, you should do your best to bring up all the relevant things that you can. And sometimes an experience that's not scientific is going to be super important for you getting that first job. So this felt like a really core component of who I was and who I still am. So leadership, customer relations management, training, design and implementation. Oh my God, yeah, I used to design the training for the bars and like hold training sessions. And then conflict resolution, because let me tell you, when you're running a bar shift, you resolve many conflicts, whether it's like between the team or whether it's between customers or a customer and a member of staff. A lot of that job was resolving conflicts in a diplomatic way. So those were my skills that I thought were relevant to working in a real job that came from my hospitality experience, which was a real job. And then the next section was research experience. So I basically grouped together my undergraduate thesis project and my internship into one area for the CV, because I feel like that was a group of things that made sense. I wanted to show them that I had a chunk of experience, not just the degree and the internship, because those two things gave me a similar set of skills. So just to go back, actually, if you remember, I don't talk much about the degree in the CV at all. It's like, oh, I've got a degree in molecular biology and genetics, predicted first, so probably knows, you know, the fundamentals of the biology. But then what I take from that is converting that experience to this section here. So let's have a look at the research experience. So I put the most recent one first, which was graduate research assistant bioinformatics. I was an intern, so this was the job title I gave myself to summarise what I was doing. And I've seen this been said before online. It's okay to change the name of your title if it better reflects what you were doing there. And at that time I was trying to describe what I was doing, and internships are associated with during your education. So I was trying to make it really clear that I was a graduate and I was assisting in the research and I was doing this in bioinformatics and it was paid. So this more accurately summed up what they needed to know rather than saying intern. At the time applying for this, I hadn't really done much, as you can see, so I've just put recipient of the competitive Genetic Society Summer Studentship Grant, furthering my honours project collaboration effort, brackets see underneath. So it's clear that I'm just staying on, but I've won a grant to do it. I've put that in bold, so it like stands out to the reader, and then they just know to read the next bit, which was my undergraduate project. So we can see here that we have the institute, it was on a research park, undergraduate honours placement student in bioinformatics, and I put that this was unpaid, just to make it clear it was while I was studying. And then I've got several bullet points to describe what I did. And one thing that I have done here, which is good, when you do your research experience, it's really important for the first bullet point to just set the scene, because the reader at said company or said institute won't be familiar with your experience that you've had. They won't have any idea of how big the group is, what the group works on. Is it all bioinformatics? Is it all multidisciplinary? So you just really need to set the scene in that first bullet point before you go diving into the skills. So I've said, conducted an in silico investigation into alternative splicing consequences in human prefrontal cortex under the supervision of Dr. blah blah blah. Well, that sounds rude. Dr. Redacted. And then I put an established group leader in evolutionary genomics. And that's because the reader might not have heard of my supervisor, so if I just let them know what they do, that's fine, rather than having a random name that doesn't mean anything. Investigating the effects of schizophrenia, etc. So I've set the scene. I'm in a group that does evolutionary genomics, and I was investigating alternative splicing. So I've set the scene. Using Bash, R and Python, so immediately I've used technical things. I executed an RNA-seq pipeline. So I've said that, what it was, RNA-seq, and then I've said what the data was, so on Illumina short read data. And then I briefly mentioned what the pipeline did, so extract, align, and map reads to the human genome, pretty standard. And then I put the analysis part, so I statistically analysed exon usage using DXseq and used UniProt and Ensemble database information to map the differential exon usage locations to protein structure and annotate transcripts. So it's not going into any detail about what I found out, it's just laying down the skills of what I actually did, because that's what they want to see on the CV, is what skills do you have? What did you apply to the data? Consistently develop programming, scripting, and data analysis skills whilst working on the HPC cluster using the Slurm workload manager. So getting all these buzzwords. And then articulately presented the research internally to the Women in Science conference and to the collaborators using nice slides. And there you go, here's my graphical design. I haven't gone into too much detail about what we found out or anything. I've just let the reader know that I did a bioinformatics project in an evolutionary genomics group. I used Bash, R and Python, and I did all of these standard bioinformatics tools. And not only did I process the data, I then did interpretation of the data and was mapping exons to proteins. And then I mentioned about the skills, the data analysis skills, and I put in that I've got cluster, etc. So that is my research experience. So that was it. I only had those experiences. So no formal work experience, just an internship that said I'm carrying on the work that I was doing before, and all I had was my undergraduate thesis project. But hopefully you can see that I really laid it out in a way to bulk up that experience, to really sell the relevant things that I did there as setting me up for this junior genomics surveillance data analyst job. Okay, so for the next part of the CV, obviously that's university done, so what else can you put? So one section that I highly recommend to have is a courses section. So I still have this on my CV now as a mid-level bioinformatician, because one thing that we're always doing in bioinformatics is continually evolving our skill set. So it's really, really important to get this as an actual dedicated chunk in the CV. So at the time when I did this, I've split it into software workshops and online courses. And then I've just listed the things that I've done. I went to this really cool, oh my god, I forgot about that. I went to this really cool software workshop where this professor had written some genetic simulation software called SLIM, and he was traveling around the world hosting workshops to teach people how to use it. So I went to one of those and it was completely free. He was from Cornell, but it was at my local uni in Norwich, but it was by Cornell University. And then I've got RNA-seq with Galaxy, which was actually just a couple of lectures in my degree, but it was basically a workshop on how to use RNA-seq with Galaxy, so I added that as a workshop that I'd done. And then the software carpentry workshop I went to, so again, these are awesome, so definitely go and check those out. And then the web development introduction that I did with Code First Girls, which is amazing because this was like the first, well yeah, oh my goodness. This was the first coding course I did. Actually no, I started in June doing Code Academy. Anyway, it was the first big course I did with Code First Girls, and they go to universities and do these uni Kickstarter courses in the UK where you can go for free and spend 8 weeks learning an introduction to a coding language. And they only hosted web development at my uni, and I was like, oh, I'll still go, it'd be really useful. And now I teach data science with them, and this is where it all began. That's cute. Aww. And then online courses, so all my Code Academy ones. So obviously now we've had the pandemic and most things are online now, so I don't think you really need to split it up the way I have done now. Just split it up into what makes sense for you. So I can guarantee you, if you really think, what kind of technical courses have you done? What workshops have you been to? You'll be able to pull out a lot to put on this. And you can even go and do a future learn course really quick in something and stick it on there that's relevant to the job. So highly recommend having a courses section just to really showcase that you are a lifetime learner. And then finally my CV finishes off with where I began my volunteer job and my employment. So I was volunteering for, like 2 and a bit years as a receptionist at a counselling centre. And this was originally because I wanted to go into genetic counselling as a career. So I started volunteering at this counselling centre on reception, and then obviously changed into bioinformatics, but still kept the volunteer job because it was really good. And again, if you think back to that job description, having communication skills was a real core component of getting your foot in the door for one of these training positions. So having something that showcased I was a good communicator was really good. So again, I only gave it 1 bullet point because it didn't need too much fleshing out, but the first sentence was just setting the scene. So 1 morning a week, receive and action incoming phone calls from distressed individuals, counsellors and clients to effectively execute thoughtful management of new potential, new client onboarding and maintenance of existing client counsellor bookings. Probably could have worded that better, but I think it just demonstrated that, because you don't know this person who's applying for the job, and if someone has spent 2 years working on the phones at a counselling centre, they can probably sensitively communicate. So that was my volunteer work. And then I had my employment. So I had it as employment, and now I'd have it as, I think I changed to hospitality employment a couple of years ago, and now it's lost its space on my CV. But I had all my employment, so I actually had to cut off a bunch of my jobs. So I've been working since I was 16. So I cut off most of my kind of team member jobs, and I kept all of my supervisory and management roles. But depending on what experience you've got, I think put it in. So I didn't do this in time order. I did it in kind of seniority order. So my most important hospitality job was when I was an operations manager for a cocktail bar, which was literally one of the best times in my life. And then before that, I was a bar supervisor at a different bar. And then actually, it then goes to the most recent one, which was when I was just a bartender and cocktail waitress. But this is when I kind of reduced my management roles, because as you can imagine, managing a cocktail bar and trying to do a degree and looking after my nan who was really sick, like it was a lot going on, so I had to drop the hospitality management stuff. But anyway, I just made sure that I kind of really sold this as something that was impressive and made me stand out. So again, illustrating, painting a picture. So I achieved an increase in sales from 5k to 18 to 20k a week whilst running the venue as interim manager. So we had this summer period where they fired the general manager and were like, oh, Georgia, you'll just do this, right? So during a summer, I was the interim manager and genuinely turned it around. It was super satisfying. So I had to hire candidates and I trained them with passion, enthusiasm and drive, and created a strong multidisciplinary team of 11 to 15 people with skill, pride and commitment to their work. So really illustrated a picture of what I did, also with numbers to really quantify what you've done. So highly recommend doing this. If there's any numbers you can drag out, to definitely do that. And that goes for the research experience, like how many samples did you work with, how big the data was. Numbers are good for CVs to describe. And then I've just got some other things. So I planned and coordinated bookings. So we'd have kind of private bookings and I'd have to listen to the brief and then produce a successful event. And then executed tasks from the operational director. So I had an operational director who was a real adult, helping me with everything, to do the figure reporting, and then continually stayed up to date with industry knowledge. And this is really interesting because this is a core component about bioinformatics jobs. You have to be staying up to date with the evolving field, going to conferences. And back when I was in hospitality, I would genuinely read up about interesting cocktails and new bars that were coming up in the area. I would network, would you believe it, and attending trade shows. So in science you've got conferences, but in other areas you still have similar things. So I'd go to trade shows where different brands would come with their products, and I'd go there and learn about the hot new things on the scene and network with suppliers. So was doing that during university. And then just mention the other jobs as well. So I was a supervisor at another bar, and again just kind of making sure that I relate it to what might be useful to the job I was applying to in science. So I was promoted to supervisor after 3 months with no prior bar experience, as I'm able to learn new skills both quickly and to a high standard. So that's just showing that I've shown an example of the fact that I can rapidly learn new skills to a high standard. And if you remember from the job spec, that's exactly what they were looking for. So really trying to demonstrate those skills from your previous experiences. And this is the definition of having transferable skills that they talk about in uni all the time. And then one little line about my other bartender position. And it's so funny, I felt really ashamed that I'd stepped down and moved to a different bar in order to just be a bartender rather than to have any kind of management responsibility, which is hilarious. That is my CV that I applied to my first job with. So hopefully this has been helpful to kind of see what that can look like. And I really hope the key take homes are, you don't need 2 pages, you definitely don't need 3, so keep it to 2, but try and do it on 1 page. Make sure that you have a skills section and a courses section, and really try and think about what are the things that you've done in your life that can be transferable and be relevant to this next thing that you're applying to. I hope you found this video helpful, and let me know your thoughts below. So thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Genomics with Georgia. If you'd like to see more content like this, remember to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you again on the next video. Bye!